Hi everyone, welcome to Beyond the Evidence. This is the channel where justice matters. My name is Marv. I am a true crime fanatic, and I love to dig deeper into the mysteries of unsolved cases. Join me as we search for missing persons, uncover the clues in unsolved murders, follow along with jury trials, and we'll be a voice for the voiceless. I'll share with you the facts, the theories, the clues, the evidence, and the controversies that surround these cases. This is Beyond the Evidence. Hello everyone. Welcome to Beyond the Evidence. I'm your host Marv. I'm so glad that you can all be here with me tonight. Tonight we continue with the Caylee Anthony story, part 2. So what are we going to talk about tonight? Tonight we're going to hear from a juror that was on the Caylee Anthony trial. And we're going to talk about the new A&E documentary that came out where George and Cindy Anthony take polygraph tests and what happened during those tests. So let's get started. So last episode, we went through the timeline of what happened to Caylee. Now, what I didn't realize is that it's been 16 years. That means Caylee would be 18, 19 right now if she were still alive. That little girl had so much to live for. Throughout this story, we know that she's always had two big supporters, George and Cindy Anthony. Whether you like them or you hate them, they have always advocated for Caylee and have always wanted to know what the truth is. Now that truth, according to Cindy, is different from the truth according to George. And we all know that Casey has her own truth. So we're going to take a look at juror number 3, an interview she did after the trial, and what her thoughts were and why she says they could not convict Casey. Let's take a look here. I'm bringing up my screen, so 1 second. All right. There my video is. Okay, here we go.
Why did you and the other jurors acquit Caylee Anthony of murdering her daughter?
There wasn't enough evidence. There wasn't anything strong enough to say exactly. I don't think anyone in America could tell us exactly how she died. If you put even just the 12 jurors in one room with a piece of paper, write down how Caylee died, nobody knows. We'd all be guessing.
So it's cause of death that was a problem?
How can you punish someone for something if you don't know what they did?
The prosecution wasn't able to give you a solid enough picture of how
You
Caylee
see that
died.
picture? I have no idea what it like. They didn't even paint a picture for me to consider.
You think that this might have been an accident, that she might have drowned in the pool? You believe the defense on that?
I'm not saying that. I'm saying it's a lot easier to get to that conclusion. I can walk from here to there and make it happen. But the chloroform, I'm all over the place. I have no idea. I'm in a maze. I don't know where I'm at.
When you all went to deliberate this case, were you unanimous from the start? Or...
No. Oh, no.
Really?
There were a lot of conflicting ideas, and some people were like, I feel like she did, but there's just not enough to substantiate it. Some people were just like, nope, she didn't do it. Like, they have nothing for me to even have any idea what happened.
There have been people who said you only deliberated 10 or 11 hours, and that shows you weren't serious.
That's speculation, and you know what? Speculation is not fact. We had a lot of discussions. We started to look through stuff, but none of it, how did she die? If you're going to charge someone with murder, don't you have to know how they killed someone or why they might have killed someone or have something where, when, why, how? Those are important questions that were not answered.
That gets to Casey.
Right.
31 days that she does not report the death or disappearance of her daughter, and she parties.
Right.
And people say, that's evidence that she is a killer.
It looks very bad. The behavior is very bad, but bad behavior is not enough to prove a crime.
Did you believe the defense accusation that this was a family that had incest in it, that Casey had been molested by her father or brother?
I have nothing to substantiate that. So no, I mean, if you don't
prove it. That played no role in your deliberations?
No, if you don't prove it, I'm not going to just because I hear it. No, that's not a factor.
What did you make of George Anthony's testimony?
He did not help the state's case.
Why?
Because he was clearly dishonest.
He was dishonest?
Yes.
How?
Well, he was evasive, number one. His story seemed to change depending on, like they said, initially he was on the defense's side, so he would, fight with Mr. Ashton and not give straight answers. But then he switched to the prosecution side, and then he won't give the defense straight answers.
I want to get back to Casey because she's been the focus of so much attention and interest.
Right. It was her daughter, so.
Casey lies.
Yes,
and
she
lies
does.
again. And then she goes out and she leads the high life while her daughter is dead.
Right.
People say that is evidence that this person was capable of killing that child.
Even if that's evidence that she is capable, it doesn't show that she did do it. Do I think she's completely innocent? I mean, I have no idea. I don't have the evidence to say one way or another. I'm not going to accuse her of killing. I have no idea.
If it was an accident in the pool or wherever, how did the child end up in a swamp months later, rotting away?
You deny it, you get rid of it. You don't look at it, you don't think about it, it doesn't exist. It's gone.
You
push it out of your
cover up
mind.
a murder. That's what the prosecution said. It was
You're covering up something. It's not proven that's a murder. You're covering up something. It's either an accident or, nobody knows what it is.
I'm going to press you on this.
Go for it.
Duct tape on a baby in a bag rotting in the woods. Most people look at that, they put two and two together, they say that's a murder.
Well, in our country, unfortunately, we have to prove it. You can't just be like, yeah, that really looks bad. Smells bad, looks bad. I get that. It does. Smells bad, looks bad. I get that. But it's someone else's life, and if I'm wrong and I kill someone else, I can't live with that.
How emotional was it to be a juror in this case?
There were quite a few people when we got back after the verdict was read. We were in tears.
Why were you crying after you handed down a not guilty verdict on murder?
Not guilty doesn't mean innocent. It doesn't mean innocent.
How do you feel about that you may have let a woman who murdered her own daughter walk off that charge?
It doesn't feel good. It was a horrible decision to have to make, but I had to do it based on the law.
How much did the fact that this was a death penalty case weigh on you in the course of the trial and in your deliberations?
Well, it weighs heavily. It's the ultimate. It's the ultimate. Like, it's as big as you can get. It's someone else's life in your hands. So if they want to charge and they want me to take someone's life, they have to prove it. You have to prove it, or else I'm a murderer too, and I'm not any better.
Wow. All right, guys. So a lot of us followed this case. What did you think about what that juror said? Because I thought the evidence lined up. We know that Caylee was with Casey. We know that Caylee went missing on Caylee's watch. We had the hair the decomposing hair in the trunk of the car that Casey was driving. What do you guys all say about this? Let's oh my goodness. I don't understand how they got to that point. She's saying she doesn't exactly know what happened to Caylee. Well, I can tell you that Caylee didn't stop breathing herself, or the coroner would have found that she died of natural causes, and that was not the case at all. So what were these jurors listening to? What were they listening to? Can any of you tell me? Carly says, bull. Yeah. She had tape around her face. This woman is nuts. Mimi of 6 says, I'm so confused. She totally contradicts herself. Yes. People get put away without bodies. Yes. You mean to tell me that this jury believed that the state did not prove that Casey is the one that took Caylee's life? Who else would have done it? They didn't bring any other people in except for George. So if George didn't do it, and the only other person she was with was Casey, what in the world were they listening to? Mimi of 6, they weren't listening. That's the issue. Somebody, some of them, or all of them, definitely didn't hear what I heard. And I'll even tell you, the judge in this case said that he heard enough evidence to convict her. So if the judge says that, what in the world were those jurors listening to? And how come they could not connect the dots and convict in this case? It's beyond disturbing she wasn't convicted. You're right. You're right. Oh my goodness. So I have another video here. I don't know if we should watch this one after that one, but I'm gonna show it. I'm gonna show it because this is what the jury was thinking. So you have an alternate juror that came out, and this video is about 3 minutes and 41 seconds. And here is what he had to say about Casey.
Refusing to speak about their verdict, but alternate juror Russell Eucler joins us from St. Petersburg, Florida. Mr. Eucler, good morning. You say you agree with this verdict and that you too would have voted to acquit. Why?
Well, there was a number of reasons. First of all, there was so much reasonable doubt. The prosecution, did not present the evidence that showed that, that Caylee had been murdered. They didn't show a motive of why, from their own witnesses, this really good mother, had killed her child. And then finally, did not show, how Caylee had died.
Not guilty does not necessarily mean innocent. So does this mean you don't think Caylee Anthony had anything to do with the death of her daughter?
I think there was a horrific accident that happened, and that was covered up. I think the family knows more than what they've said. There was a comment at the end of the trial that said, things snowballed and got out of hand. And again, I think that's true.
However, the little girl died. Caylee Anthony then went on to spend 31 days shopping and drinking and partying. Did that bother any of you on the jury?
Well, of course, the behavior was bizarre, but what I took from that the family was very dysfunctional. And you got to remember, Caylee just didn't start lying for the 31 days. She had been lying for the previous 2 years. So it was just kind of the norm for her.
I think some people might be surprised to hear you call her a good mother, given the fact that she did all that lying for 31 days. And even before, as you pointed out, her own lawyer called her a liar and a, quote, slut. How do you get to the good mother part?
Well, that was from the evidence that the prosecution brought out. The first number of witnesses were Caylee's friends. And every time that they said that they saw, Caylee with Caylee, it was a loving relationship, and no one provided any evidence to the contrary.
Many, as you know and have heard, are outraged by this verdict. We just heard in Yunji's piece that many people are saying that the jury should be given, quote, an exit competency test. What do you say to those who don't agree with your verdict and think you got it wrong?
I'm sorry. People feel that way. I'm shocked. Since I've been home last night and watching just the news accounts of what I've missed, it's actually shocking that they're coming out so against the jury.
Well, Mr. Uckler, finally, the jury in this case has basically set Caylee Anthony free, either very soon or within a year and a half. What do you think she's going to do with the rest of her life? What would you say to her? That's
a tough question. I think, Miss Anthony definitely has some issues that she needs to address, professionally. Something horrific happened to Caylee, a sweet little girl that died. And so hopefully she'll be able to, move on with that.
All right. Russell Uckler, thanks so much for being with us this morning.
Thank you.
Wow. Wow. So he thinks she's a good mother. And you know what? The first 2.5 years of Caylee's life, she may have been a good mother. She probably was. As long as Cindy was watching over her, she was. But as soon as she got out of that house, she wasn't a good mother. A good mother does not wait 31 days to report her child missing. A good mother does not go out partying during those 31 days and get tattoos that say beautiful life and, all of that while their child is missing. A good mother doesn't stop police on every turn and lie to them and obstruct them from finding their child. I just don't understand how these jurors got this. I really don't. Mimi of 6 says, this case is why being a juror should be a full-time job where you have to go to school for it. Well, this is how it's been done all these years. Most of the choices and decisions that jurors make, I can agree with from the many trials that I've watched. They do get it wrong. They got it wrong in this case. They got it wrong in the O.J. Simpson case. They got it wrong in the Parkland shooter case when it came to his punishment. Miracle of Hearts, you bring up a good point. Okay. So I think Jose Baez had the jury wrapped around his little finger. After this trial got over, I watched a lot of read a lot of news articles, watched videos. They said one of the things that Jose Baez did is every morning he got up. He said hello to the jurors before court even started. Said, I hope you have a good day. At the end of the day, he said, thank you for coming. We'll see you tomorrow. He was being personable with the jurors. Prosecution didn't say anything to the jury. So did that make Jose Baez more relatable to those jurors? Miracle Heart says, no accident. The PA and bodyguard that was with her after her release on bail had done something interesting, some interesting interviews. They did. They absolutely did. Carly says, I have no words, truly. Miracle Hearts 2 says, I thought I misheard him say good mother. No, you did not mishear him. Ava says, so wrong. You got that right, Ava. You got that right. So then, what happens after the trial, after these interviews? Everything dies down. Hey, Sterling. Hey, just want to say hey to everybody in the chat. Thanks for coming. Everything dies down. You don't hear a whole lot. Here and there, Casey pops up about where she's living, what she's doing, and it all quiets down. And then 2 years ago, we get the Peacock documentary of Casey's version of what happened. Same old is exactly what my thoughts were on that. She's not taking any accountability for what happened to Caylee. She blamed George for Caylee's demise. She blamed George for essaying her, and then went on to say not only did he essay her, he essayed Caylee. So you have two parents of this woman, and they've gone through hell for all these years. When this was going on, they had people standing in front of their yards screaming at them. All the media attention on them. But they were the only ones advocating to find Caylee and to find out what happened to her. Only ones. Now, do I think Cindy is innocent of everything? No. I believe that Cindy did perjure herself on the witness stand trying to cover for Casey with the internet searches. I truly believe that. But now you have these grandparents who have spent the past 16 years going through all this hell, reliving it over and over and over again. And they've just had enough. They heard about the Peacock documentary. They didn't watch it, but they did hear about it from others. And enough was enough, and they just had to finally put things to rest. So that's where we are today. That's how A&E got involved. Cindy and George says, we want to take a lie detector test to prove that George did not SA Casey or Caylee. To prove that George did not have anything to do with Caylee's death. And in Cindy's case, to prove that she did not know anything as far as what George had done or anything like that. So if you missed it, the documentary, and boy, they could have come up with a better name than this, but the documentary on A&E is actually called Caylee Anthony's Parents, The Lie Detector Test. Can't get any more clearer than that, right? So I have notes that I have pages and pages of notes. So if you see me look over, it's because I'm trying to get the information correct. So I have a couple videos that I can show. They're just brief about what happened during this. And they're short, but on TikTok, I have, if you go to the TikTok, Beyond the Evidence, and you go to the reposted for Beyond the Evidence, there's 21 parts of this A&E documentary on there that you can watch. When you watch it, think about what everybody says. Watch their body language. Watch their facial expressions and their reactions. Listen to what they're saying and see if their facial and body reactions match. Okay. I've watched all 21 parts several times. But let's take a look at these couple of little clips that I do have, and then we'll talk from there.
Why is the daughter the two of you raised making the cruelest accusation against her father?
Because she found out that he was the main witness for the grand jury against her. The only other witness besides the sheriff's department detectives that were out to get her, and now her father's out to get her.
George, people have a hard time with this. Why did you testify before the grand jury?
Because I believe my daughter should have been put in jail. I was hoping so. Yeah, absolutely,
You
I
were
was.
hoping so.
That's right. One of the prosecutors, he says, George, he says, based on what we have right now, your daughter is facing either death or she could be in jail for the rest of her life. That hit me like a ton of bricks.
And was that before you testified or after you testified?
That was before.
The police can lie to you legally. They can lie to you.
Oh, absolutely.
You know that. But George, by going in and testifying, you gave the prosecution the charge they filed against your daughter. Do you understand why your wife is upset to hear this? 42 years.
Yeah, 42 years for us.
Why is she crying?
Probably because most of those years I was a real...
Oh my God, George, let's stop. Let me tell you why I'm crying, because you're not going to get it. I never knew until today that Jeff Ashton came to you before you testified to the grand jury and told you that they had enough evidence to charge her with murder and all of that. I knew all along that they were playing games, but I didn't know Jeff Ashton talked to him prior to. I thought the first time Jeff talked to him about this kind of thing was in the grand jury. So they groomed him. It just confirmed my theory all along that John Allen, the sheriff's department, brainwashed you. And then the fact that the prosecutor comes and talks to you and tells you, we have everything we need to put your daughter in prison for murder in your granddaughter. And doesn't that trigger you? Of course you're going to want to testify, but you didn't have to believe them. You could have come home and we could have talked about it. We could have gone in there together and gone through things, bounced stuff off of each other. But you made the choice to believe them. That's why I'm on a different page than you.
This is your wife. You're in this together. Why would you tell her?
We would have been on the same page, is my whole point, and that's why I'm shaking now. They divided us. But thank you for finally showing me this, because I would never have known why this is us right now and for the last 15 years.
Wow. Talk about jaw-dropping and eye-opening. Now, was it wrong of the police to go to George and say, we have enough to put your daughter away? No, absolutely not. Because that's exactly what law enforcement thought at the time. They thought they had all of their I's dotted and T's crossed and could prove that Casey was the one that unalived Caylee. So out of the two of them, Cindy and George, who would you have gone to? Would you have gone to Cindy, the more emotional one? Or would you have gone to George, who was the more analytical one of the two of them and could follow what they were saying? I would have went to George. Does that mean law enforcement groomed him? No. They gave him the facts that they had. And from those facts, he came to his own conclusion that they were right. But you see where this is, where Cindy is and where George is and where they've been for the past 15 years is complete opposite. And I don't think it would have mattered if George had gone home and talked to Cindy and said, hey, police said they have this, they have that, they have this, they have that. If we think about this analytically and go through it, Casey's the one that did it. I still think Cindy would have came up with an excuse not to believe it. What is everybody's thoughts on what they just saw? I mean, you heard her. They've been like this at each other for the past 15 years over what happened to Caylee. Do you think if George would have went home and talked to Cindy about this, that they would have been on the same page? I don't know. I really don't know. But this is why I like this documentary. This is not just a documentary about the lie detector tests. You get to see a lot of conversation happen between the facilitator of the documentary and the Anthonys. You get to hear them talk about things and how they felt at the time and what they knew and what they didn't know. And it's important to see and hear what they knew and what they didn't know, how they felt at the time. So like I said, this documentary is not just about the polygraph and the questions and the result. And a lot of it is about their reaction to the Peacock documentary that Casey did that they never watched. Because during the A&E documentary, they show them clips. They have them watch the documentary and the allegations that Casey made. Hi, Misty Free Spirit. So where does this documentary, A&E documentary, take place? Well, it takes place in the Anthony's home, where they've lived all of these years, where they lived with Casey and Caylee for the first 2.5 years of her life. That's where this takes place. They're in the living room and they're having a discussion, and then they're in rooms when the polygraph test takes place. So, as I said, in the Peacock documentary, Casey alleges that Caylee drowns. George comes out with Caylee in his arms and says, "Look what you've done." And hands Caylee to Casey, where she cradles her and is crying. And George tells her, "I'll take care of things." And then she doesn't know where Caylee is after that, because George takes her. Well, and then she says that there was George essayed her and Caylee. So because of these lies, this is why George and Cindy have come out and said, no, Casey's a liar. And we want to do the polygraph to prove our innocence. So what was the polygraph test about? Well, there's 2 parts for George. He didn't have to do just one, he did 2. Whew, and it was tough. It was very tough to watch, let me tell you. The first part of the polygraph had to do with the essay of Casey and Caylee. The second part of George's polygraph had to do with Caylee's disappearance. All right, Mimi, let me get my TikTok link. So if you don't have access to the A&E app where you can watch this on A&E, you can go to the TikTok page for Beyond the Evidence, and all 21 parts are on there. So for George, this is all about showing that he did not have anything to do with Caylee's demise or anything to do with any kind of abuse towards Casey and Caylee. Okay. Cindy's part in it, she's always been accused of hiding the truth and that she knew something. she had information about George being involved, or has helped to cover up what happened to Caylee, and that she knew what happened. So her part of the polygraph and the questions they specifically asked her had to do with that. And we'll go over the questions here in a little bit. So basically, when it comes to Cindy, they said she was trying to protect her family and cover up what happened and protect Casey and George because she knew what had happened. Well, what do you think happened there? Let's take another look at one more clip that I have that I can show. And then we're going to get into what were the questions, what were the answers, and what were the results.
I don't know your daughter.
I don't know her now either.
Every bad thing she did, she blames on you, George. She blames it on you.
Yes, she certainly does, doesn't she? And it hurts.
She claims you lied about being the family breadwinner and you secretly gambled away Cindy's retirement fund. And then she, in a very definitive way, says that you had affairs.
Yeah, I know she did.
Number one, George never spent a dime of my retirement. So that was a lie.
Big time lie.
He gambled away his retirement from the Orlando Sentinel.
Online, and I admitted
On
that.
his own. In her own little head, there's a kernel of truth that he gambled, which is true, but all the rest of it is a lie. And he never told people that he made more money and supported us. Everybody
Never
knew
did.
that I made more money than he
I've
did.
admitted
No one
that.
ever said anything about it.
Is there any truth to the allegation that George was having affairs?
Well, I gave him 2 months to figure out where he was going to go when we were separated because we need a break.
We needed it. From me gambling, that she was thinking, George, what the hell are you doing?
I had filed for divorce in December. He moved out in November. Casey helped him set up a dating website because George was going to date after we separated. He probably may have because we were separated for 6
I did
months.
not go out on any dates or go look for anyone else because always my heart has been here.
Casey, in her own words, admits
That there was always a
a
kernel.
kernel of truth.
Well, that's what we discovered as things were going on. There was always some truth to it. That's why it was hard.
What I can't get out of my mind is a piece of tape I saw of a disagreement over this whole point of Casey's lying. And you, Cindy, saying,
I know. I remember what I said.
what did you say?
Casey learned by example. And I,
Wow.
Okay, wait,
Please,
no, but I'm
please,
telling you,
please
you
don't
lied for
personally
me
attack
for
me.
several years, and that's where our daughter got it.
Don't personally attack me at this.
No, I'm
It's not supposed to be about us.
But I was referring from 2002 about the gambling thing. And that's when she started lying in her teenage.
So do you
Junior,
stand by that
senior?
statement today? That Casey
Casey
learned to lie
from George? Yeah.
If you stand by the statement today, George, what you have to accept is that you, through your behavior, helped to raise a person who was comfortable in lying.
That's true. That's the
Am
truth.
I misstating this? Am I overstating it?
You're not misstating that at all. You know, it's really hard sometimes to come clean, especially if you have a gambling problem. But I have my daughter right there. And we also say that in front of her. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I did this. And see, and I really believe that when Casey heard that or saw that, she thought, if Dad can lie, I can lie.
So you accept that your daughter learned to lie from you?
Yes.
That's the first I heard him acknowledge that. Thank you.
Wow. Again, I have to say, now that clip there, I did not see that on the TikTok replays. I have not actually got to see all of the A&E documentary on my own. So I can't wait to go back and watch this. You're right. You're absolutely right, Carly. A lot of teenage girls lie. But if you see your dad doing it and it's okay for him to do it, it does promote lying even more. And we know that Casey pretty much lies about everything, right? Like they said, there's always a kernel of truth in everything that she says. A small piece of it. It's always a kernel of truth. But then she exaggerates and lies about the rest of it. So as you go through the parts, you're going to hear George, Cindy, and the facilitator talk. Then they get to the actual polygraph part. Okay. So when you do a polygraph, before anything happens, they sit you down and they specifically tell you what questions they're going to ask. And they do this so that you're not surprised. You know what's coming ahead of time. Okay? And in the video, you see him asking George questions, and George is fidgeting or not answering right away. And he's like, "You're struggling. Why are you struggling with this?" And, George says his answer, that first of all, he was in a car accident, so his hand and stuff does twitch, and you're supposed to be extremely still. And you'll hear the polygrapher say several times, "George, you have to remain still. Stop moving your feet. Stop moving your hand," things like that. So it's tough, and not to mention, while this guy is asking these questions, things are popping into your head. Okay? You're remembering different things. And George actually says, "I'm sorry, I lost my focus. I was thinking about where Caylee was found." And the polygrapher says to him, "George, you have to focus. You have to get all of that out of your mind and just answer the questions." And they're right. He's absolutely right. All right. I am going to... So one of the things that I kind of was surprised at in this documentary is the fact that they focused on George's state of mind and the fact that he did try to commit suicide and that he's thought about it several times, right? And then In the actual interview part, Cindy, her anxiety gets the best of her. And she actually has to leave the living room. She goes in the bedroom and she's sitting on the bed, and George is there. He's cradling her, and she's having an anxiety attack, is what's happening. And they go down to the floor together because she's like, I can't breathe. I'm gonna faint. I'm gonna pass out. So they go down to the floor together. She gets through it. She comes back out. She finishes the interview. From my understanding, this happened a few times during the taping of this. And during the taping, you see, even from those 2 clips that I showed you, that George and Cindy are still like this. And the facilitator actually takes George out of the house at one point, just to get him away from Cindy and just to talk to him one-on-one. It's very interesting. I'm urging all of you to watch this A&E documentary. I had to download the A&E app on my phone and project it to my TV, and that's how I'm watching it. Okay. What were the questions asked of George? One of the questions they asked is, did you ever have any sexual contact with Casey? Did you ever touch Casey for sexual gratification as an adult? And then, as an adult, have you ever had any sexual contact with a minor? Okay, so these 3 questions were very directed to get the answers and see if he was telling the truth when it came to Casey and when it came to Caylee. So then the next questions, because I told you there's 2 polygraphs for George. The next questions he was asked are, did you actively cause Caylee's disappearance? Did you knowingly conceal Caylee's whereabouts? And these are the questions that George struggled with the most, and that he was told that he needed to give a direct answer and to stop moving around. The last question for George was, did you place Caylee's body in the ground? Poignant questions, specific questions. Okay. Now, the first 3 questions were asked of George, and then he got to get up. And then it was Cindy's turn. Cindy's questions were targeted more about George and what did he know and what he shared with her. Her first question was, did George ever confirm that he was actively involved in Caylee's death? The next question, did George ever confirm that he actively participated in Caylee's disappearance? And the last question, Did George ever say that he knew where Caylee was while she was missing? Wow. So you see them both go through their polygraphs. First, George, and he struggled. Let me tell you, he struggled. I felt so bad for him. Cindy knocked it out of the park. She was very confident in her answers and everything. And then George went again. And I'm telling you, I thought to myself, oh my God, can they even get a completed test on this man? That I was so worried that it would come up inconclusive, sorry. So then they go back to talking to the two of them. And the facilitator is playing a part of Casey's Peacock documentary. And they asked who the father of Caylee was. And she said that at that time she had been assaulted and ended up pregnant. And Cindy's response to that was, wow, that's the first time I'm hearing that. Why didn't she come talk to me? She talked to me about everything else. So it's little things like that that get thrown in this A&E documentary that are so interesting. So what happens? They have to wait a few days to get these polygraph results, right? They finally come back to the house. It's the facilitator of the interview. It's the polygrapher. It is George and Cindy. They're all sitting at a table. Now, the polygrapher tells them that he has had these results examined several times. So, what does he mean by that? He himself goes through and scores it. He then looks at the actual polygraph test, because they do that and score it. And then he calls in a second individual who does polygraph tests to look and examine everything. And they all came to the same conclusion. When it came to George and the 3 questions they asked about did he have any sexual contact with Casey or a minor, those 3 questions, he passed. And he passed with flying colors. There was no mistake in it. It wasn't even close. He passed. And he broke down and cried. Imagine that man living with that for 16 years. Your daughter saying you did these things to you. And feeling like no one believed you. And finally, a test comes out and says you're telling the truth. Then they go to Cindy. They go through the questions that he asked her and her answers, which we all know. And she passed with flying colors. And she's happy, right? So then they go back to George and they're talking about the last 3 questions, if he had anything to do with Caylee's demise, if he had anything to do with covering it up, or if he had anything to do with putting her where she was found. He passed with flying colors on that, too. Talk about a man who was so relieved and emotional. And once again, he was so happy that he was vindicated of all of this. And Cindy says, I always believed in you. I knew you didn't have anything to do with this. I knew you didn't do anything to our daughter. I knew you didn't do anything to our granddaughter. Imagine the weight that was lifted off of that man's shoulders when he got those results. Cindy was relieved, but I don't think she cared less. But George, that meant everything to him. Yeah, it was. It absolutely was. So now you have polygraph test results that say that George and Cindy have not been lying for the past 16 years. So what does that mean? Well, we all know that Casey lies. We all know that Casey won't take a lie detector test. Now, I do have to look up one thing here, so just bear with me. Okay, so A&E.com, if you want to see some of the videos regarding this, you certainly can. On the website, they have some. And actually, I think you can watch the whole episode on here, on that link. But this is what I want to show all of you guys. Because everybody that I have been talking to says, oh my God, I wonder what Caylee Anthony is thinking about this. Well, let's find out. There we go. So this is from the Messenger 6 days ago. And it says Caylee Anthony threw a fit after watching her father George pass lie detector test, friend says. So it says Caylee Anthony grew more and more distraught as she watched her father take a televised polygraph exam. And now a friend says she's considering a public rebuttal. She really threw a fit, says the source, who has known Anthony for several years. She got really upset when George passed the lie detector test. She was banking on the fact that he would fail. George, 72, and his wife Cindy, 65, appeared in the A&E Network's documentary, Caylee Anthony's parents the lie detector test on Thursday night. During the 2-hour special, they were hooked up to a polygraph to answer difficult questions about the 2008 unaliving of their 2-year-old granddaughter, Caylee Anthony. It was an emotional and dramatic ordeal for George, who struggled to answer many of the questions. At one point, Cindy had a panic attack while discussing the slain toddler. But at the end of the 2-hour special, the Anthonys heard the results of their tests. "You were truthful," said FBI Special Agent George Olivia. "Your test showed no deception." In response, George burst into tears. Meanwhile, Casey, who watched from her South Florida home, had a different response. She was sending a lot of texts, says the insider, rambling, angry, emotional texts. She's mad. She's really mad. Casey has long maintained that her father abused her while she was growing up and claimed that he was responsible for Caylee's unaliving. Those allegations, which George was vehemently and repeatedly denied, were part of her defense during a sensational 2011 murder trial that resulted in a shocking acquittal. She reiterated the accusations in Caylee Anthony, Where the Truth Lies. That was the name of the Peacock 3-part series that debuted last year. But in the wake of George passing a lie detector test, Casey is considering speaking out. Again, she feels like she'll have to do a rebuttal at some point, says the source close to Anthony, because this made her look bad. Like, really bad. This made her look just awful. So, image and perception is all about what Caylee Anthony is concerned about, what people think of her. Yes, Carly, I am. I had trouble with the video for part 1, so I'm working on that tomorrow, and I will be releasing day 1 and day 2 on Sunday. So what do you think Caylee Anthony's going to come back with now? Do you think she'll offer to take a lie detector test? I don't know. I don't know. But all I do know is that as they go at each other, Casey and her parents, it keeps Caylee's name out in the mainstream media. Because let's face it, this child will not get justice here on earth. And one of the last things that I wanted to talk to you about that I've been holding off on is in this A&E documentary. Casey texts Cindy and says, "I want to come and get Caylee's remains and her other items that were left at your house." And Cindy says, "Absolutely not." This is the only thing I have left of Caylee. You took her away from me. Absolutely not. And Casey says, "Well, I guess I'll have to wait till you're dead then." So apparently, Cindy told Caylee that after she passed away, she could have Caylee's remains. Well, after all this, now this has been years ago, Cindy hasn't talked to her within the past couple of years. She said she sent her a response back and said, "You will never get Caylee's remains. Never." And Cindy tells the facilitator that yes, she had told Caylee that she could have them, but after everything that Caylee has done, she will never, ever let Caylee have Caylee's remains. She will go and distribute Caylee's remains before she dies so that Caylee cannot have them. Cindy did admit that she believes that Caylee is responsible. In what way? That's another thing. I believe that from what I'm still gathering, Cindy still thinks the drowning in the pool is the way that it happened. George believes that Caylee actually did commit the act of unaliving Caylee. And that's why the two of them still butt heads. How they are still married after 42 years and after the past 16 years, I will never know. Because the facilitator asked George, how often does this come up? Of Caylee come up? And George said, every day. Every day for the past 16 years, this has come up. And this has always come up between the two of us. So these two individuals have not moved on. They still put one foot in front of each other and they live their lives. But the death of their granddaughter is still prominent in their lives today. Carly says her mom bends over backward for her. Mine would have unalived me with her bare hands if I did. Yeah, I agree. I agree. So just do me a favor. You know, every so often, not just her birthday, you know, holidays, the anniversary of her death, but every few months, put something out on your Facebook page about Caylee. Make the world remember her and continue to remember her. Because, like I said, this little girl is not going to get justice here on earth. They can never try Caylee Anthony again. She is going to have to wait until the afterlife to get her punishment. But that doesn't mean that we should just forget about what happened to Caylee. It's important to keep her memory out there and her memory alive. And that's why I'm asking every so often, just throw up a picture of Caylee, throw up an old article or video, you know, and just have everybody remember her. That's what this channel is all about, remembering the victims and providing you insight into what these families go through. Well, everybody, we're going to continue following this one because I'm pretty sure Casey's not going to be able to stay quiet. So I'm pretty sure there will be a part 3 to Caylee's story at some time. But I want to thank all of you who were in the chat talking with me while we're going through this. Thank you to all of those who are going to watch on replay. Please hit the like button, leave a comment down below, and share this stream out. So for me, I'm Marv, and you've been watching Beyond the Evidence. I will see you next week. Thank you for joining me. Have a good night. Bye.